Hey guys, thank you so much for joining us here. We are now on episode 6, which is crazy.
Right.
So that is actually it's really cool because we've hit the halfway point. Like that's almost a year because we do this once a month.
Yeah.
So to get to the 6th one, we're halfway there. Thank you so much again for watching and the questions that you guys have asked. And we're going to do one here that's a little bit different. Instead of answering a bunch of questions, kind of knocking them out as fast as we can. And sometimes they're not fast. Oops.
Yeah.
I had a couple people ask me what our testimonies were, and a lot of people don't know. I mean,
Right.
I haven't told very many people about mine, and a lot of people don't know my dad's, and they were curious about what it was, and I thought it'd be a good time to kind of sit down and give our testimonies.
Yeah.
And kind of why we are where we're at, why we do this podcast, why we go to church, you know.
How did we get here?
How did I get here? You know?
Yeah.
People wanted to know. So I wanted to start with asking you a question is, when you were younger, did your mother and father push you into church? What was your background like? Did you go to church on a daily basis, or was that just something totally not happening at Larry's household?
Yeah. I grew up in a household that didn't go to church. So church to me was as foreign as, me trying to speak French.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know anything about church. And it's not because I had bad parents. So I want to say that first.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that I wasn't raised in a Christian home at all.
At all.
I didn't know anything about other than preconceived ideas of what I thought church was.
And what were those? Like, did you think that it was weird?
Well, when I was young, I thought Christians were geeks and wimps.
Like lame.
Oh, super lame.
Yeah, super
like
lame.
The kids that I knew, no offense if you're out there, I just thought they were geeks, man. Super wimpy. And that was just my perception.
Yeah, the perception.
So that's how I grew up.
Yeah.
I just thought people that went to church, they were different than me. I knew they had this God connection thing going on, but I also thought they were just kind of wimpy. So that was my
And so
perception.
then when you went to school, when you started going to school and stuff like that, there was no Christian school that you went to.
No.
And you went to
Johnstown.
You went to Johnstown because you're a Johnny.
Yeah. Yep, I'm a Johnny.
And what was your first encounter with God where it made you start thinking about it maybe a little bit?
I think as a human, I think we all have, even when I was young, you have this concept of, I think there is a God. For example, like before I gave my life to Christ when I was young, we would drive around and we would get beer and we would go in different parking lots. And I'll tell you where we would never go, even if it was empty. We would never go to a church parking lot because we knew that there was a God.
That was no.
That was a no-no. So,
question.
We didn't do that. But to answer the question, I think I would see other people that say weren't wimpy. Specifically, there was a guy named Mike Leonard, and he was a quarterback. I think I was a freshman or sophomore, and he was a senior, and he was a quarterback at Johnstown, went on later to play at Mount Union and did very well. But, I mean, he was a great athlete, and I watched his life a little bit he would always do the prayer, like when we would take a knee, when we were in the locker room. He would do the prayer, and deep down inside, I'd be like, "Wow, that guy's kind of cool." But that's not me, because I see Mike grew up in church. I didn't, so I thought there was this unsaid rule. Yeah, it's just
not for me.
It's not for me because I wasn't raised that way.
So I know you had a friend, Pat Kesey.
Yeah.
And was it his mom?
No, it was Neil Ball.
Neil Ball. That's Neil Ball. Was his mom?
Yes.
Okay, so tell this story. I like this story. And this is when you were growing up, and because you were still running around. Like shockingly, he was drinking and smoking,
chasing girls and drinking,
all
partying, man.
Just having a good old time.
Right. So we were like 17, 18.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And anyway, my friend's name, Neil Ball, and his mom's name was Ivy. And I'm short. I'm like 5'5". She was probably like 4'10". But every time I would go over to her house, she was what I considered, because it was freaky, she was a Jesus freak, because I would go over to their house and I would knock on the door, and of course, Neil wouldn't be ready. We're getting ready to go out. We're going to hit the Agora downtown.
And that's the worst, right? Because then you're just stuck in the living room. You're like,
she's
no.
Literally, she'd be like, "Oh, Larry, I just want you to know God has a plan for your life." And, I'm being nice. I'm like, Okay, lady.
And then where in the back of your mind where you're going, man, I'm about to go get
Oh,
drunk.
we're about to go get stoned.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thanks for telling me that. But no, and she'd be like, no, can I pray for you? And she'd grab my hands, and I'm thinking, Neil, I'm going to kill you.
Get me
Dude,
out of here.
Why are you not ready? From now on, I'm going to pull in the driveway and honk, and you can just come
Stand
out. I'm
outside.
not going inside.
Yeah.
Your mom is jacked up. I mean, but I knew she had a hotline.
Yeah.
At some level,
Yeah.
she was a real Christian to me.
And I think that's what can scare you when you don't know, but you know there's something there in that lady, and you're going, I'm creeped out.
Dude, I could feel that.
You could feel something.
She knew God.
Yeah.
They were Christians, but I knew she like talked to him and knew him personally. And she would pray for me and grab my hands and pray. And I would feel, not that it's about a feeling, but I could feel like some kind of presence was there. And then we would leave, and then we would
do your thing.
And then I would go get drunk. And she would just say, and one time I'll never forget, she prayed and she said, Larry, you're going to be a preacher one day. And I'm like, okay, lady, seriously. Now I know you don't know God. Because you're not hearing right. You're like deaf. You're not hearing that. But that was crazy.
Yeah. And it turns out you end up being a pastor here in the long run.
So crazy.
So then that leads you to meeting my mother, who's actually over there on the couch. How did you meet her? Because she was a Christian,
right? And
you were not,
right?
At the time,
absolutely not. No.
And I know that you guys met. Was it at the ice cream?
Yeah,
Is that how you guys met?
Yeah, it was at the dairy.
And what made you think to yourself during the times when you were doing that and you met her? And I know people were saying she's a Jesus freak,
right?
What made you go, sweet, that's what I want, when you yourself weren't that?
Well, what happened is that the other friend, Pat Kesey,
that's okay.
Pat Kesey and I, we had went out once again and we were drunk. We came home and we lived in a trailer, and it was like 2:00 in the morning. And I'll never forget, I was just going through a difficult time in my life. It was a mess. I was just messed up and was getting tired of living the life it was, but it was weird. And I came home. He went to bed. I went to my room. I went to the bathroom and I looked in the mirror and I was like, and I was drunk. I was absolutely drunk, but I was like, just so frustrated and depressed. And I was like, God, if you're real, just do something, because I didn't know how to pray.
Yeah.
But that was a prayer. Actually, God took me at that, because then what happened was, it was literally the next day or that week. I went to the Dairy Isle in Johnstown to go to lunch, and a girl waited on me. And after she waited on me, she's like, hey, there's a girl in the back there that thinks you're really cute. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I'm looking. I'm like, well, what's her name? And it's like, it's April Thompson. I'm like, okay. I didn't know much about her. So I go back and talk to Pat Kesey, my roommate. I said, hey, dude, there's this girl. I think she's kind of cute too. I didn't really meet her, but she's at the Dairy Isle. Her name's April Thompson. And he's like, dude, she's a Jesus freak.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and he said, so you're not going to get anywhere with her.
Yeah.
You ain't getting nowhere with her. And it just kind of stuck in me like, okay, she's a Jesus freak. What does that mean? Because I didn't know anything about God. And I thought, well, you know what? Let me give, because I've been with a lot of girls that weren't Jesus freaks. So let me see
what's
what happens.
Going on with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the rest is,
and then, we started dating, and I'll never forget it. That her dad said, if you're going to date my daughter, you're going to go to church. And I was like, great.
Yeah.
Because once again, ladies and gentlemen, listen, I didn't know anything about church. So I don't know how it worked.
Another language.
Everybody, I mean, I'd never been to church. So I didn't know that, do you do hymns?
What do we do?
I don't know what I do.
Up? Do I sit down?
I was
do I need
so nervous. And so I go there the first time, and I'll never forget, I bring, and of all things, Ivy Ball, the one lady, had given me a white Bible. So I'm carrying this white Bible out to the side, because first of all, it looks super sissified. It's white. And I'm holding it out to the side, going into the church. We sit down. I'm like, okay, so I wonder what's going to happen next. And so we stand up, they sing some songs, sit down, stand up, we sing some songs. It was a good church. It was a Grace Brethren church. And it was good. And then they all got their Bibles out. So I grabbed mine. I'm like, all right, well, this should be easy. Much like a schoolroom class, science book. Turn to page 196.
Right. You're like,
nope. He's like, turn in your Bibles to John.
Yeah.
And
you're thinking,
I'm like,
where in
John?
the world? Who's John?
Like, how about a page number, bro?
Yeah.
And I'm looking at everybody, and I'm looking at my time, the girlfriend, And she's like close to the middle of her Bible. I'm like, okay,
okay, somewhere
it's got to be in the middle
Yeah.
somewhere. By the time I get there, he's like, all right, go ahead and turn to Numbers. So I'm looking at which way, because of course I got to be cool. I mean, with my girlfriend, I don't even know what's going on. So I'm flipping back to the left because that's the way she's fine. That's the way the whole day was. By the time I finally found it, he was going to the next one. And it was horrible. I mean, it was a horrible time for me. So just so you know, those of you that are watching, maybe that's your life. Maybe you don't know how this works or what it means. And it's okay, man. If you just trust God and you take that step, my life has never, ever been the same because of me submitting to what God was saying in my life and saying, take that step. Because see, I asked him that night, God, do something in my life.
And I think a lot of people that might be in that situation, and you look at yourself and I've done that. And you go, just show me something, or maybe it's when you're like, you know what, I'm going to change my ways, blah, blah, blah. And then the next day, nothing happens.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, wait a minute. Like, why isn't this? And then people will just give up like that.
Oh, yeah. Because you didn't see a result.
You didn't see a result instantly.
But isn't that like going to the gym?
And
working out once and going, why don't I look like Arnold Schwarzenegger?
Yeah.
I worked out once.
Why am I not looking ripped?
Right.
Like,
why am I not shredded?
We're disciplined in that area where you go, well, it's
Right.
going to take time. And you go, okay. So, people that are discouraged and they think that after maybe even a week or maybe a month or whatever the case may be.
I want to rewind a little bit about my life is that, I grew up in a home that they did the best they knew how. I have 2 other brothers, 2 other sisters. And my mom was remarried. I never really knew, and I never met or knew my real dad. So I had no idea what he looked like. For some reason, our family, for whatever reason, just kept it at bay. It was a secret.
Yeah.
So I grew up not knowing who my father was. And then the only father I had was a stepdad who did the best he could do. And at the end of the day, for all of our kids, and including me, it affected us in a big way. He was an alcoholic, super smart man, but he was addicted to alcohol. He self-medicated and it was very abusive. And again, I don't blame him. It's what he knew. And then at the end of the day, he ended up taking his own life in our home, which has affected every single person in our family.
Absolutely.
It affected my mother, my 2 other brothers, my 2 sisters, me. It affected us in such an incredible way. And so, I just, because sometimes people will look at you and they have a preconceived idea, like they meet Larry, the Larry now, and go,
that's life.
So you must have went to college and had a good family and went to church. And on the contrary,
it was the complete opposite.
Not that my life is any worse than anyone else's, but it just lets you know that's where I came from. And I've had to grow in trusting men because men in my life have always either abandoned me or I couldn't trust them. And so there's just been so many areas that God's had to work in me over the years, and he has, so that I'm at a place where I'm at now, which is a good place.
And that will bring me to another question. So when did you know, because she said you were going to be a preacher, right?
Right.
When did you get to a place where you were like, I think this is true. Like this is happening. When did the lifestyle change? At what point in your life were you going, I'm doing this now?
My girlfriend, which is now my wife, we got married and we started going to this church. It's called Village Baptist Church, Pastor Johnson. And I was wanting to grow. I think as a believer, there's phases. It's kind of like the Christian manifesto. You start out as a baby Christian and here's kind of what you do. And then you, as a Christian, you become a little more mature, and then you start doing these things. And then you really become, and this is important to understand, you become a disciple. When you become a disciple, that's even more different than a baby Christian. You're just doing different things. And I wanted to grow so much, and as I was growing, I would watch him do what he did. And it wasn't an ego thing, like I want to be on stage. I saw him changing people's lives through the power of Christ and sharing the good news. And I'm like, I feel like I got to do that. Now, I also got to let you know, I used to get sick if I had to stand up in front of the classroom and give a book report.
Did you? I didn't even.
You can ask Mom. I would get sick, petrified. You know,
That's
because
crazy.
one of the number one fears that people have in life is public speaking.
Public speaking, yeah.
And I hated it. Matter of fact, when I played baseball and they would call me out to pitch, I'd get sick.
Yeah.
I would go behind the dugout,
yeah.
throw up, and then go out
Get your breath back
because I was on a mound.
You're on there. Everybody's looking at you.
And so I'd be petrified. And God called me out of that and said, I have a message for you. And this isn't about you. It's about me and other people, changing people's lives that are broken in the good news, right? And so that's when it kind of hit me. And I'm like, you know, I might want to do this, but I'm awful nervous and I'm kind of scared. But
and that's okay.
I might want to do this.
And when you started there, when you step out and you realize you're doing something that you yourself cannot do, and you realize, because you don't want to, you're so nervous, whatever the case may be in your life, where you're like, I am so nervous, like I can't do this. And that is exactly when God shows up, because you realize you can't do it within yourself.
Within yourself.
And it just amazes you. And it's
with any kind of results.
Thing. Yeah.
You know, that the Holy Spirit is able to utilize, because, you know, I'm not that good at all at public speaking, but God has transformed me into a communicator to be able to communicate his love through his word, so that, again, people's lives can be transformed.
Yeah.
Fact, man. I mean, it just is. I was lost, now I'm found. I was broken, now I'm not. And he still works on me, man. There's still life's challenges. Life's a challenge, man.
Life's a challenge.
Right.
And so then now, how long have you been speaking for?
So
how long
probably,
has it been? Like, roughly when you...
I had my first speaking engagement at that church. And I'll never forget Pastor Johnson asking me, he said, hey, do you want to give a short message?
And what was your initial response? Were you thinking?
I'm like, why? I don't know if I can do that. And he goes, hey, I'll give you a little help. And you get up and just be you. And people were so nice. I stood up there for about 10 minutes and it seemed like an eternity.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, okay, so I read that. Anyway,
God is good.
Yeah, God is good. Amen. And, it never really come to a point of anything. But the people were so kind. They're like, that was really good. You did really good. And I'm like, that was horrible.
Right.
And I was sweating. I mean, it was crazy. And that's where I started. And then God opened the door. When you submit yourself to God and your gift that he's given you, he will create a place for you. Don't go try to make it. Too many people try to push their way into a place.
And I think that in the world today, it is always the biggest push, or at least in my opinion, is it's about you.
Right.
It's about you. And following God do that is just the total opposite. And that's hard.
Right.
Because you're conditioned to be like, man, it's about me and I just want to have fun. I want to be happy. Whatever it takes to be happy. And then when you submit, you realize all of these things. You're just like, man, I was doing this all wrong.
Yeah.
And you realize what God
it's
can
that.
do.
Look at me. I can, because there is somewhat of a rush when you speak and you know that it helps somebody. It feeds you back. So you get addicted to that. You get it like, man, I want to speak again. I want to do this all the time, And the point is to keep yourself humble. God will open that door. If you want speaking engagements or you feel called, first of all, do the work and do the process. God will open the doors. It reminds me, and you and I have talked about it. It reminds me so much that I'll meet people and I don't even say, hi, I'm Pastor Larry. I mean, that's just weird.
Yeah.
Hi, I speak at times or whatever. It's almost like the Ted Lasso thing where Ted Lasso, maybe you've seen it, maybe you haven't, but it's the dart scene. And he says, Ted, or he says, if you would ask me, Ted, do you play a lot of darts? He's like, bam.
Boom. Yeah.
And they're like, whoa. He's like, I would have said, every Sunday, but they didn't ask him. And the point is be curious, not judgmental. So I'm the guy that's going to go, God, if you're going to open the door for me to speak, I'm not going to go seek it out. Someone's going to get a hold of me,
right?
Because you'll figure that out for me where I need to
because
be.
That's God.
I'm not going to promote myself. God will do that.
Right. That's awesome.
Following Christ.
I'm trying to think. Would there be another question to follow that? So that's your story.
That's my story.
That's the testimony of you were not going to church. You were not doing just a whole lot of nothing. Polar opposite of everything.
Yep.
And now here you are when you submit. basically.
Yeah.
To God, and that's your story.
When you submit to God, and I know people will watch and maybe they don't feel, they don't understand. Well, what I want you to know is that God isn't a feeling.
Mm-hmm.
God's a fact. He created us, each and every one of us. And when I looked in the mirror, even drunk, and said, God, he heard me.
Mm-hmm.
Said, do something with my life. He heard me. And I went to bed and felt nothing. Matter of fact, the next day, I forgot to say this, I got up and because of what I had said, I'd never talked to God before.
You're like, do I look different?
Other than saying, GD it, or whatever, using his name in vain.
Yeah.
I looked in the mirror and I thought, well, maybe you'll look different. And I'm like,
it's still
nothing.
Me. Yeah. Yeah.
Still me. So it isn't about a feeling,
mm-hmm.
but it's a matter of being aware and knowing that God created you. Absolutely. He created you for who you are. He wants to have, here's the awesome thing about God, is that he doesn't need anything, but his desire is to communicate with his kids.
Right.
And all I did was say, I talked to him for the first time and said, God, if you're real, do something. He's like, I was waiting for you to talk to me.
Exactly. And I think people think that you have to have a particular prayer
a
lot of times. And you go, man, am I even doing this right? And if you're at least trying and you're saying it can just be a regular conversation. Yeah. You are. He hears you.
Prayer.
Like, trust me when I tell you. He
it doesn't have to be this King James,
thou,
Goddeth with the
right.
Like you have marbles in your mouth. It's like, no, God help.
He just wants to talk to you.
God do something. Yeah. So that's my story. So
okay.
So what about
we'll try to,
because you're my son. So what's
yeah. So for people that were wondering about me, because a lot of people don't know, is they assumed obviously since I was raised by Larry and then my mother April, and I was raised in church all of my life, like out of the womb. I feel like there was probably Christian music going and church. You guys were bringing me, Wednesdays and Sundays and going to this church and that church. And that's really all I knew. Christian school. All I did was go to Christian school.
Music, because all the other music was of the devil.
What was the devil, and NSYNC and the Backstreet Boys were that was pushing it.
Yeah.
And I didn't know, obviously I didn't know when I was a kid that I had a calling on my life. And the first time I wanted to share that, Mom, how old was I when Grandpa was praying over me? 2?
Yeah, probably 2 years
Probably
old.
2 years old. And I was in the crib and he was praying over me as a baby because I was sick. And he came out and was saying, what did he say basically? He was... wild. Like, go ahead, say that, because I'm thinking.
So the Spirit of God almost knocked him over when his grandfather was praying for him when he was 2.
We're saying,
he felt the Spirit, on Mac.
So you go, okay, there's a calling for.
I know it's weird for people watching.
Weird, right? Very strange. Listen,
I get you.
They told me that story later, and I was like, I'm sorry, what? Like, that's the weirdest thing I've ever heard in my life. So as I grew up, and I was going into middle school and high school, and I went to LCCA.
Which was Lincoln County Christian Academy.
Lincoln County Christian.
You went to a Christian school.
I did, and it was a Baptist school. So you had your sideburns had to be a certain way, and your belt had to be a certain way. Socks had to be a certain way. You had to talk a certain way, and I knew in high school as I was graduating that God was talking to me, and since I had been around it all my life, I said no. I said, no, thank you. And I don't want anything to do with it. And I could hear him saying, I'm waiting for you. I'm waiting for you. And I would just be like, you're going to be waiting forever because I ain't doing it. You know what I mean? I don't want to be like, I didn't want to be like you.
Well,
I didn't want to be like Mom.
I get that.
And I was like, I want to be like everybody else. That's what the biggest thing I said. I saw people going to parties and people drinking, blah, blah. And I said, man, that's all I want to do. I just want to do like that. And I don't want any voice in my head to drive me crazy. And as I was getting into my 20s, actually, we went to World Harvest once.
Oh, yeah.
And this is a good story.
Oh, man.
And there was a young man, an older guy named Willie.
Yeah.
I think his name was
Willie.
Yes, it was Willie. Who's no longer with us, from what I've understood. We went and visited a church, and an usher came to sit us down. And
it was Willie.
It was Willie, and he let my dad go through, and my mom, and my sister, and I think maybe her husband. And he stopped. I've never met this guy in my life. And he stopped me.
Probably 10.
I don't know. How old was I, Mom? Teenager?
Yeah, 12.
And he shakes my hand, and man, he just looks at me. And it's like he was peering into my soul, and I was thinking, what is this dude about to say? He looked like Morgan Freeman, by the way. And I was like, what is Morgan Freeman about to say?
Yeah.
And he's like, young man, I don't know you, but you got a calling on your life, and you better stop. You better stop running, or you're gonna, I don't even know the exact words, but it hit me like a ton of bricks. And I was thinking, dude's crazy. Like, nope.
Yep.
And I still said, I was like, no, like absolutely not. And then years pass, and I go and visit another church with my mother, and it was Impact City, and Mindy Ross was the pastor's wife. And we came and visited. She said, "What's your name?" It's my mom.
Yeah,
April.
you were sitting in the back, minding your own business.
Yeah,
right?
I sat in the back,
like,
and I was probably 25, 26, somewhere around in there. And I was like, I'm gonna try to maybe kind of get back, but I don't know. Like,
checking it out.
Check it out. They do worship, and Mindy comes back into the back, and I'm thinking, oh, she's coming towards me. Like, what does she want? And she's like, "Excuse me, what is your name?" I was like, "Mac," and she's like, "That's right, Mac." And she's like, this might sound crazy, and you may have never heard it before, but wow, there's a calling on your life, and you really need to stop running. I hope that doesn't sound weird. And I remember looking at my mom, and I'm like, for the love of God. And I remember I genuinely thought to myself, leave me alone. Like, I remember laying in bed at night and genuinely asking God to leave me alone. Like, I don't want any part of that. I don't want to speak. I don't want to talk like my dad does. I don't want to go to church. As a matter of fact, on Sundays, I want to sleep in, and I want to do whatever the heck I want on Saturday night. Amen? Yeah. And I got to a place where, it sounds crazy, but it's very true. I wouldn't lie, is the voices were so loud. God was so loud and also so patient. And I felt so much love from him, and him saying, I'm waiting. I'm still waiting on you. And the best thing about this is I was doing things I shouldn't have been doing. I was drinking, going to places, wherever. And no matter where I was or what I was doing, I could feel God going, this isn't where you're supposed to be, but I still love you, and I'm waiting. And I'm just waiting for you, Mac. Whenever you want to submit, I'm waiting. And it was like the most, I don't know, gentlemanly, loving thing where I was like, oh my gosh, I'm doing all of this junk, and he still won't leave me alone because he has a plan for my life. And I think saying that, he has a plan for everybody's life. He has a plan for your life, and you can ignore it as much as you want. But what's the song? There's the song. He leaves the 99.
Yeah.
He climbs up the mountain. Yeah. And that is exactly how I felt, because you realize God's true love when you say, I want nothing to do with you. And he says, I'll wait because I love you. And that is it gives me chills, and it's just like an amazing feeling. So finally, I had enough, and I was just like, I literally can't take it anymore. There was a job that I had that I couldn't stand, and I was just in a bad place mentally, and I didn't know what to do. And eventually I just said, I'm so tired of it, God. Like, what do you want? What do you want from me? And I started praying. I started going to church, and he just completely transformed my life when, kind of like we were talking about, I let go of my life and said, fine, what do you want me to do? And what happened is he said, I want you to be like your dad. And I realized, man, I like being like my dad because he's got all this awesome stuff. And I realized I liked speaking. I liked speaking words of encouragement to people and people that are hurting. And it was filling my cup. And I felt God say, this is what I wanted you to do, because I knew you would love to do this. And there's so many people, there's so many of my children that need to hear from you. So stop running and come to me. And I said, yes, sir. Yes, sir. And ever since then, my life has just been just completely different. I'm a completely different human being, and wouldn't regret it for a second. And that's what God has done for me and my dad.
Yeah.
And
isn't that cool how it's two stories that are different but yet the same? Mm-hmm. I didn't know God and was just running, period. Mm-hmm. You knew God but were running.
Yeah. And so there could be people out there that's going, oh yeah, I know God. Or maybe your mom and dad go to church and they don't make you go because you're going, I ain't going. And the good news is I'm telling you right now, just from personal experience, he's never going to let you go. I mean, he just won't. If you feel like you have a calling on your life or anything at all that you're supposed to be doing, it'll never go away. You can run from it. That's your decision. He gives you the ability to decide, but he'll never leave you alone. And it's because he loves you. And it is amazing. It's truly amazing.
One of the things in closing, as mm-hmm. what preachers say, is, maybe you're watching and maybe you're disappointed because maybe you did grow up in a Christian home and it wasn't what you thought it should be. So therefore your perception is, if this is what God is about, just saying, the way my mom and dad manage this,
I don't want nothing to do with it.
I don't want anything to do with it, because if that's the kind of God they serve because of the way I see them act, or the way you see another person act, or they're just all hypocrites or this, that doesn't devalue the fact that there is a God. We're not him. He loves you, and he has a calling on your life. So maybe that's you, and I just don't want you to feel that way, whether you grew up in one, or maybe like me, you didn't grow up in a Christian home at all, and you think the churches and people and all that stuff is hypocrites. And you're right.
Nerds.
They're everywhere. Nerds, sissies, and all of that. Here's what I can tell you. Forget all that other stuff. That's fine. But don't let that stop you from realizing and knowing God is real. He is absolutely real. 100%.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that's it. That's our testimonies. I hope you guys enjoyed those stories. Thank you again so much for watching, and we will catch you again on episode 7. Thank you guys.